What happens when the camera that made you famous becomes the witness that destroys you? That's the question everyone in the courtroom asked when Vanessa Cole, the internet's most flamboyant influencer, walked through those heavy oak doors, wearing diamonds that shimmered under the fluorescent lights like she was stepping onto a runway instead of facing a fraud trial. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't silence her phone. In fact, she went live. Hundreds of thousands watched as she smiled, waved, and whispered into her phone, "Guys, can you believe this? They're actually putting me on trial for helping charity." The bailiff warned her twice. She laughed both times. That laugh, it wasn't nervous. It was sharp, glittering, and cruel. The kind of laugh that fills a room not because it's loud, but because it dares anyone to stop it. Even the judge looked up. Judge Samuel Hayes, 72, known for his patience and moral gravity, paused mid-note and watched her for a long, silent moment. "Miss Cole," he said finally, voice steady, "in this room, your followers do not determine the truth." She smirked. "Neither does a gavel, apparently." The courtroom gasped. Friends, imagine that. Mocking a judge on camera in real time. The live stream comments exploded. Some laughed, some begged her to stop. Others said, "This is going to end badly." But Vanessa didn't see it that way. To her, this was content, just another episode in her glamorous, chaotic life. She winked at the camera, adjusted her sunglasses, and said, "Relax, it's just a fine. Worst case, I post an apology and move on." No one in that room could have predicted what would happen next. Because behind that calm expression, Judge Hayes wasn't angry. He was waiting. Waiting to teach her a lesson that no viral clip could erase. And as the courtroom lights flickered slightly from the heat outside, that laugh, her careless, mocking laugh, would become the sound everyone remembered. Not for its confidence, but for what followed it. The day a rich influencer mocked the court, and the judge's comeback shook the world. Before the cameras, before the chaos, before the courtroom erupted in gasps, Vanessa Cole was untouchable. At least, that's what she believed. Born in Los Angeles to a real estate magnate and a former beauty queen, she grew up where apologies were optional and consequences were negotiable. Her life was curated long before social media existed. Designer clothes, elite schools, weekend trips to Paris just for content. By 21, Vanessa had turned her privilege into profit. She built an empire out of her image, millions of followers, endless brand deals, and a team that filmed her every move. She wasn't selling makeup or lifestyle. She was selling the illusion of perfection. Every laugh, every tear, every relatable moment was carefully staged under soft lighting and filters that made her life look effortless. But behind that glitter, cracks were forming. She began a charity campaign called Hearts for Hope. The idea was simple: raise money for sick children through luxury influencer events. It sounded noble, and it worked. Millions were donated. Celebrities joined in. She was praised as a new face of philanthropy. But soon, questions surfaced. Leaked screenshots, bank transfers, a $250,000 marketing expense that led straight to a private island retreat. It wasn't just bad press, it was betrayal. Donations meant for children's surgeries were allegedly spent on yacht parties and branded collaborations. The internet turned fast. Hashtags like fake heart and hoper hype trended for days. Vanessa laughed it off in her usual tone. People are just jealous. But as sponsors withdrew and lawsuits piled up, that laughter began to sound hollow. Her followers split in half. Some defended her blindly, others demanded justice. The world wasn't just watching a scandal. They were watching a queen crumble, publicly, pixel by pixel. And then came him, Judge Samuel Hayes. Known as the People's Judge, he was respected nationwide for his fairness and moral depth. He wasn't interested in celebrity. He wasn't impressed by wealth. For 30 years, he had presided over cases that broke hearts and built hope. He once said, "Justice isn't loud. It whispers in the conscience of those who think they're above it." When the Vanessa Cole trial was assigned to his bench, reporters filled every seat in the courtroom. The air buzzed with curiosity. How would this old-school judge handle a social media celebrity who believed she could rewrite the rules? Outside the courthouse, fans held signs. Some screamed support, others jeered. Influencers posted reaction videos. "This is gonna be historic," one commentator said. "It's not just a trial, it's a collision between two worlds, law and influence." Vanessa arrived in style. White designer suit, diamond earrings, and a smile that said she wasn't worried. Cameras flashed as she blew a kiss toward the crowd. "See you inside," she said to her live stream. Inside, though, the tone was different. The wooden benches creaked with the weight of silence. The walls, lined with portraits of past judges, seemed to watch her. And at the center of it all sat Judge Hayes, calm and unreadable, pen tapping softly against his notepad. He didn't see an influencer. He saw a young woman who had never been told no. And as the cameras rolled and the world tuned in, one truth began to emerge. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a test of character, humility, and truth. Vanessa thought she owned the world, but the world was about to remind her it doesn't belong to anyone who forgets their humanity. The first day of testimony was supposed to be routine, opening statements, evidence introductions, legal formalities. But nothing about Vanessa Cole was ever routine. When the bailiff called "All rise," Vanessa didn't move. She stayed seated, scrolling through her phone, eyes half-lidded behind oversized sunglasses. The audience shifted uneasily. A few camera shutters clicked. Judge Hayes looked up slowly. "Miss Cole," he said evenly, "in this courtroom we stand out of respect, not for me, but for the law." Vanessa smiled lazily. "I respect the law, Your Honor. I just don't believe it applies to every trend." Gasps rippled across the room. The prosecutor, a modest woman in her 40s named Karen Bell, blinked in disbelief. "Your Honor, the defendant—" But Hayes raised his hand. "That's enough. Miss Cole, I will overlook your first display of contempt. Don't make it a habit." Vanessa leaned back, whispering into her phone. "Guys, did you hear that? Display of contempt. Sounds like a perfume line." Laughter from the live stream filtered faintly through her phone speaker. Judge Hayes watched in silence. He didn't scold her. He just studied her, like a man trying to read a language he'd seen before. The prosecution began. "Miss Cole is accused of misappropriating funds from her charitable foundation, funds meant for critically ill children. We will prove she diverted over $800,000 into personal expenses." She smirked. "Oh, please. That's not diversion. That's influence." "Excuse me? You spend money to make awareness. If I'm on a yacht talking about sick kids, that's reach. That's marketing." The judge's pen paused mid-note. He glanced up. "Miss Cole, this is not a boardroom. It's a courtroom. You will refrain from speeches unless asked." But she wasn't listening. She was too busy checking the comments on her phone. These children were promised hope. Some of them died before receiving the help you pledged. For the first time, Vanessa's expression flickered, just slightly. Then, as if catching herself, she forced a smile. "Tragic. But that's life. Not everyone makes it. That's why we try." A woman in the audience covered her mouth in shock. Someone whispered, "Heartless." The judge leaned forward. "Miss Cole, I suggest you take this process seriously." She tilted her head. "I am, Your Honor. I even wore beige so I'd look responsible." The courtroom broke into uneasy murmurs. The bailiff stepped forward, ready for an order, but the judge raised his hand again. "No, let her continue. Let her show us who she is." That line, calm, almost casual, hung in the air like a warning. The prosecution presented screenshots, invoices, photos of luxury resorts, bank transfers. Each one chipped away at her polished image. Still, she smiled. Still, she joked. "Come on," she said once, glancing at the jury. "Who here hasn't spent a little too much on themselves?" No one laughed, not even her lawyer. Judge Hayes's gaze remained steady. He didn't interrupt, he didn't raise his voice. He let the silence after each of her remarks stretch long enough for the weight of her words to sink in. After 2 hours, he finally spoke. "Miss Cole, I've seen arrogance before, but arrogance built on insecurity is fragile. Be careful what you break next. It might be yourself." She scoffed. "You sound like my therapist, Judge." And through it all, Judge Hayes remained composed. He spoke little, wrote much, and watched her reactions closely. To the world, it was just another celebrity trial. But to him, it was something deeper. A portrait of what happens when ego replaces empathy. By the end of that day, the influencer who thought she could outshine the law realized something for the first time in her life. Fame couldn't protect her from truth, and truth was coming for her next. By the third day, the tension in the courtroom could be felt in the air, thick, electric, and fragile. The prosecution called their final witness, a nurse named Martha Greer. She was quiet, gentle, and visibly nervous. In her trembling hands, she held a folded letter. "This," she said softly, "was written by a child named Oliver. He passed away 2 months ago." The courtroom fell still. He was one of the kids Miss Cole promised to help through Hearts for Hope. When his surgery couldn't be funded, he wrote this. Judge Hayes nodded solemnly. "You may read it." Martha unfolded the paper. Her voice cracked as she began. "Dear Miss Vanessa, my mom says you're famous. She showed me your videos. You said you'd help us, and I believe you because you smiled. I like your dresses. I want to wear one like that for my school party when I get better. Please, don't forget me." The words trembled out of her mouth, hanging in the courtroom like ghosts that refused to leave. By the time she finished, no one spoke. Even the bailiff's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Except Vanessa. She exhaled and said with a dry laugh, "Are we seriously reading fan mail now? This is a court, not therapy." The sound hit harder than a gavel. Gasps echoed. Martha froze mid-motion, letter still in her hand. Even the camera stopped moving. For a moment, Judge Hayes didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply stared at her, expressionless, almost eerily calm. Then he removed his glasses, set them on the bench, and leaned forward, his voice so quiet it made the silence scream. "Miss Cole," he said, "do you understand what you just mocked?" Vanessa frowned. "An emotional ploy. People use stories to get sympathy." The silence deepened. Hayes folded his hands. "Sympathy is what keeps this world humane. Without it, we are just clever animals competing for applause." She rolled her eyes. "That's poetic, Judge, but it doesn't change anything." He leaned back, still silent. Seconds passed. The sound of the courtroom clock became deafening. Vanessa shifted in her seat. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Still silence. The audience held their breath. The silence was intentional, deliberate, surgical. The judge was letting the weight of her own words crush her. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Cole," he said, "do you understand what that silence you feel? It's the sound of every person you disappointed listening to you and realizing you don't care." Her jaw tightened. "This is getting dramatic." "Indeed," he said softly. "Drama, Miss Cole, is what happens when truth finally meets arrogance." The courtroom erupted in a faint murmur. Vanessa's smile faltered. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Judge Hayes turned to the nurse. "Thank you, Miss Greer. You may step down." As she left, the judge closed the file in front of him with deliberate calm. "This court will recess for 1 hour," he said. Everyone stood. Vanessa didn't. She sat frozen, staring at the empty space where the letter had been, the echo of silence still ringing louder than applause ever had. And for the first time in her life, Vanessa Cole had no audience left to impress. When the court reconvened after recess, the air had changed. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, reverent. Vanessa entered slower this time. The sunglasses were gone. The confidence dulled. Yet she still carried that faint smirk, the last defense of a crumbling kingdom. Judge Hayes watched her return to her seat. He didn't begin with paperwork or procedure. He just looked at her for a long time. Then softly he said, "Miss Cole, please stand." She hesitated, then rose, straightening her blazer. "Do you understand why you're here?" She gave a small shrug. "To make an example of me. That's what this is about, right? The big bad influencer brought to her knees." He shook his head slowly. "No. You're here because you broke something far more valuable than the law. You broke trust." Vanessa's lip twitched. "Trust? People betray each other all the time. Politicians, CEOs, charities." He cut in quietly. "But you weren't one of them, were you? You were supposed to be the difference. You built an empire by convincing people you cared." Her jaw tightened. "I do care." "Then tell me." He leaned forward. "When did caring become a business strategy?" The question hit like a slap. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Did you ever meet any of those children? Did you look into their eyes, or did you just see them as props for your next post?" She blinked rapidly, her voice lowering. I wanted to, but it wasn't that simple. My manager said it would be too emotional, that it might hurt the brand." "Your brand?" "The same brand built on the illusion of generosity." Her eyes darted downward. The defense attorney placed a hand on her arm, but she pulled away. "Miss Cole, you remind me of someone I once knew. A young woman who believed she could outtalk truth, outshine failure. She learned too late that humility is not weakness, it's survival." For a moment, something shifted in her expression. "Tell me," he said, softer now, "when was the first time you realized being perfect mattered more than being real?" Her lips parted. "When I was 9. My mom entered me into a beauty pageant. I tripped on stage. She didn't speak to me for 2 days." The courtroom stilled. "And so you built a life where failure didn't exist, where smiles were scripted and love was measured in likes." Her voice trembled. "It worked. People loved me. They loved who they thought you were, not who you are." Tears gathered but didn't fall. She inhaled sharply, defiant again. "You don't understand. People expect perfection. If I showed weakness, I'd lose everything." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe losing everything is the only way to find yourself again." Her throat tightened.
For the first time, her voice broke. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought I was helping. I just didn't know how to stop." He let her words hang in the air. "And now you do," he said quietly. "Because relevance fades. Character doesn't." Vanessa's tears finally slipped free, tracing down the same face millions had adored through filtered screens. She looked smaller now, not because the world had shrunk her, but because truth had stripped her armor away. Hayes folded his hands. "Miss Cole, I'm not here to humiliate you. I'm here to remind you that accountability is not cruelty. It's compassion in disguise." Her voice cracked, whispering, "So what happens now?" He looked at her with weary eyes. "That depends on what you do with what's left of you." The courtroom was silent again. Even the cameras seemed reluctant to intrude. In that moment, the influencer who once mocked the law stood face to face with the only thing she couldn't edit, filter, or control: herself. And as the judge's words echoed through the chamber, everyone knew it. The punishment hadn't been spoken yet, but the transformation had already begun. When the court gathered the next morning, it felt different. The reporters whispered instead of shouting. The audience, once eager for spectacle, now waited in quiet respect. Even the hum of the air vents sounded subdued. Vanessa Cole sat